The extremely volatile nature of these recent distractions should give you a big red flag for when it comes to how close we are to real SHTF or collapse style scenarios here in the United States. The level of distraction that's being forced in front of you right now is hugely concerning to me because it shows just how bad they're having to hide the fact that we are on the edge of the cliff. Understand that this whole Supreme Court situation is very volatilic in nature, and it is going to set us up for another summer of violence, which just so happens to be right before another election cycle. This is how things work lately in this country, but it's only getting worse every single time we go through one of these scenarios. And understand that regardless of how you feel about the situation surrounding this whole Supreme Court controversy, the people who are worked up about it right now are just like the people who would be worked up about something like the Second Amendment being overturned. They're willing to hit the streets and possibly conduct violence in order to preserve what they feel is something that they should have access to. Now, understand why that could be so dangerous when the people are being turned against each other and calls for protests and violence and things of that nature have already been made. We are now destroying ourselves from within while those who are in power are pulling all the strings. And this is what should concern you as a prepper the most, because when these things are happening, it's because everything else is so bad that they know the only way to maintain that power is to throw something else to the birds. Send another level of distraction out there that's going to keep people's minds off of the fact that our lives are being ruined every single day by these people who are making decisions without any of our real input. And keep in mind that they're not working for you or I, they're working for lobbyists, and this whole system is extremely corrupt and no longer representing the people who it's supposed to take care of. So, and look, I don't need to be taken care of by any government, but I just wanted to make you aware of the fact that the job is not being done, of course, and things are only getting worse. We have the Fed coming out and saying inflation, or they're raising rates by 0.5 of a point because they want to make sure they can combat inflation. And at the same time, we also have the housing market still bubbling out there until it'll eventually burst. We have the issues with the supply chain having a backlog over 6 months long because of the lockdowns in Shanghai. We have the disruptions caused by the conflict overseas right now. And we know the food shortages are on their way, and we haven't even seen anything when it comes to that quite yet. Yes, we felt the impact of empty shelves and things of that nature here over the last few months, but I guarantee you we aren't even prepared for how bad it's going to get. The level of desperation we're going to see in people is also going to become very dangerous as well. Keep in mind that during the Great Depression, homicide went through the roof, and we are on our way to another depression very soon here, if not already in it. Now, the fact that the media won't even tell you we're in a recession should tell you everything you need to know. There is no doubt in my mind that these people have your best interest completely thrown out the window. They don't care about you, they don't care about me, and they don't care about what really happens to those of us who can't afford a 30% increase on our grocery bill, who can't afford a 50% increase on our utilities, who can't afford to just start paying outrageous amounts of rent because of this crazy housing market and the fact that people are competing at a level that they haven't had to compete before when it comes to having a roof over their head. Not to mention you have foreign adversaries buying up all of the real estate within our own country, and we have oligarchs within our country, tech oligarchs you might say, buying up all the farmland. There's a lot of reasons to be concerned, and yet the top news stories right now are a Supreme Court leak, which definitely needs to be fixed because that's a huge issue, and at the same time you're going to have Johnny Depp trial and you're going to have Dave Chappelle being attacked, right? These are your major news media stories right this second, and yet at the same time you and I can't even afford the gasoline to get to work in order to then pay our bills, which we also can no longer afford. So don't look over here when everything's becoming very terrible very quickly. Look over here instead and get really worked up and upset about it and fight with each other while we screw everyone over here from our ivory tower, because that's what we do. We gain power and we try our best to put as much money in our banks as we can before the inevitable collapse, and then during the reset, guess who's going to come to save you? Those same ivory tower oligarchs, right? So listen, I wanted to have this discussion with you because I do feel in my bones that things are getting much worse and that we haven't even experienced how badly they can get as of yet, but it is on its way. Don't let all this stuff in the media distract you from what's really going on. This hot topic issue that everyone's debating right this second, it's very divisive, and it does a perfect job of putting people against people, which is always the end goal. And at the end of the day, we need to work together right now because the people who are in charge are really screwing everything up, and you and I are gonna have to rely on each other just to get our basic needs met. But that's very hard to do when everyone's at each other's throats. This is only going to get worse. This is something that I feel is obviously part of an agenda, and we also know that a lot of people aren't going to look between the lines. They're not going to read further into the situation and try to figure out, that maybe this is just a way to get us to be at each other rather than working together. They're going to see it for the face value that it's presented with, and then they're going to take it and run with it and lose their minds over things when their neighbor might be starving to death, but they're going to be on the internet telling you why you're a bad person or why they agree with you. Whichever way it might be, it doesn't even matter anymore. Things are getting extremely difficult. Fertilizers through the roof, crops aren't being planted. There's a million reasons for why we're not going to have enough food, enough resources, enough energy, enough anything for us all to sustain a quality of life that's actually worth living. And yet, here we are, distraction city, right? So understand, this is not the time to get complacent. This is not the time to get too involved with what's happening in this political circus right now. What's really important right now is making sure you have things to eat, making sure you have something to drink, and making sure that you have the ability to protect yourself and your family when those other people who decided not to pay attention and decided not to do anything to prepare for what's coming think about coming your way to see what you might have once they begin to starve. And that is definitely a big concern, especially the way things are looking with food banks right now, saying that they're running out of food to give out and that they're getting longer and longer lines every single day. Eventually those lines are going to spill over and find their way somewhere else. So I wanted to address everybody and talk about this because it's just getting out of control. Things are just falling apart every time we look around. And this conflict overseas, I mean, it's only going to escalate and eventually move us towards something that you and I only talked about in the sense of fantasy just a few years ago. We're looking at something more realistic now that could be extremely detrimental to the entire planet. But hey, don't worry about that. Get worked up about this whole Supreme Court situation, and then go ahead and get worked up about Johnny Depp and Dave Chappelle and everything else that's in the media right now. And then you and I can talk about preparedness later, I guess, when it doesn't matter anymore because we're all living in a nuclear wasteland. These are things we have to keep in mind. I'm just trying to keep everybody on track, and I'm trying to remind you as to what's really happening here rather than let everyone lose their minds and lose that focus that we all desperately need right now more than probably anything else.